Bridger Fates, and welcome to Master Stockman Consulting's supplemental videos on ag research. You know, one of the biggest challenges for ag producers is understanding how, if, or when to implement ag research. We have 5 videos with 5 different research projects from right here in Utah. We'll describe the projects to you, and then we're going to work through the principles that you've learned in the Business Power Tools for Ag videos to be able to analyze these research projects to understand if, when, and how you should implement them. These videos are sponsored and funded through Western SARE, and we appreciate them for their funding. Now here's Wyatt Fates to talk to us about this first research project.
Thanks, Bridger. The project that I chose through Western SARE is Economic Evaluation of Agricultural Diversification through Agritourism, specifically for the Intermountain West. Now, I know that is quite the title of a project and there's a lot there, so let's unpack it a little bit. So first off, what is agritourism? It's pretty much exactly as it sounds. It's basically, if you mash the word agriculture and the word tourism together, you get agritourism. And so it's really just bringing people to see, you know, agriculture, what it is, where their food comes from, you know, letting them kind of see inside the process and how things are made or how they're done, or how it tastes. Now, some examples of agritourism could be things like a pumpkin patch or a corn maze. It could also be, you know, the local farmers market, or maybe a beet farm with a bed and breakfast. All these are different examples, and there's a lot more depending on, you know, regions or where you're at. And all of this kind of ties into agricultural diversification. Basically what this means is, you know, diversifying the ways we can profit off of agriculture. You know, it allows us to kind of bring in new sources of revenue, new sources of income, and also kind of new sources of education for people who might not be familiar with agriculture. And with all of this, you know, we need to decide, does this make sense for us and our operation? And that's where kind of the economic evaluation comes in. So we're going to see, you know, can we actually make money off of this? Now today we're in beautiful St. George, and this is a popular spot for tourism, but there's a lot of people that come to St. George that would never realize a place like this is here, you know, and so it kind of provides an opportunity for agritourism where we could bring the tourists that are already coming here to St. George to kind of see this other side of things and see the kind of agricultural side. Now, it is important to decide if, you know, agritourism is right for you, and there are several things to consider when doing that. So, you know, one thing we need to consider are, what are the benefits, what are the risks, what is your market, and then once you have that information, making a business plan, and then once we have that business plan, then we can evaluate, is this actually going to be profitable? So let's take, for example, you know, if you wanted to open a bed and breakfast, what are the benefits? Well, obviously you're going to be bringing in some money, not only just through the bed and breakfast, but maybe you're bringing awareness to what your other products are on your operation, and driving more sales through people just coming to your bed and breakfast and seeing what else you have to offer. You know, but then we also have to think of, what are the risks? Well, you know, there's health and safety concerns. You may have to hire extra staff. There's certain regulations you need to follow, and there are risks associated with, you know, those things if regulations are broken or issues with staffing, things like that. You know, there's many other risks. And then you also need to understand your market. So are you in an area that is, you know, so that people are going to come to a bed and breakfast? Is there already a lot of tourism coming into where you're at? Or are you somewhere where maybe that doesn't make the most sense? So you do need to understand your market, what type of people you're going to be bringing in, and how hard it is going to be to get people there. And then once you have all that information, that's when you can make a business plan. Do you already have the infrastructure in place? If not, you need to plan for how you're going to implement that, put it in, things like that. All of those things to consider, put it in your plan. And then once you have the plan of, okay, this is how I'm going to run my bed and breakfast, this is what I'm going to do, then kind of going through the costs of everything that's going to take, and then also going through what you plan to make as far as what you're charging people that are coming, and considering each of those. Once you have kind of all of that information, is when you can really decide, is this going to work for me, and am I going to be able to make money off of this? And now that you have a better understanding of this project, let's go ahead and see how those tools do kind of apply directly to this project.
Well, that was a good summary of this project. Now we'd like to talk about how this project might connect with some of the tools we've been talking about and some of the other concepts we've been talking about in these videos. So why don't you kick us off on this one?
Yeah, so anytime you're thinking of either adding a business to your existing business or just starting a new business altogether, obviously there's a lot of thought and planning that needs to go into it. When we're thinking about kind of the economic basics of that, it really boils down to cost versus revenue. Are you going to make enough revenue to offset your costs and make a profit? Now, it's not as simple as that. There's a lot of planning that needs to go into place. Business plans are going to be essential. Evaluating your budgets, trying to compare maybe other businesses or people that have already done what you're looking to do. All of these are key in figuring out whether or not that revenue really will offset the costs. But those are kind of the starting blocks for this. So Hudson, obviously, with these starting blocks, there's going to be a lot of record keeping. What type of records do you see being maybe most important when considering adding agritourism?
I think with this project, Wyatt, the record keeping is really pretty straightforward. You've done a good job, talking about costs and income, and the income in this should be really straightforward. I think if we were going to talk about the records that are important to keep, I think we would really want to focus on costs. It's normal for producers to undervalue their labor. It's normal for producers to say, well, if I can bring this asset over here, and they don't really value that as and deduct that from their expenses. So I think it's a term that I use kind of sometimes, but I think the costs in this could become smoky really quickly. And I think keeping them really clear and really concise on what it's actually costing us. So at the end of the day, we can make a decision based on, is that income worth what I put into it? But I think it's pretty straightforward in this scenario.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right there. And there may be costs that you didn't consider initially that come up kind of later on as you are actually maybe implementing the business or getting closer to implementing the business. Barton, how do you think kind of the scientific method can help you with that process and maybe changing costs or things you didn't anticipate?
Yeah, in this project, I think a producer is going to have to be constantly reevaluating whether or not they are meeting their goals here. So the costs, the income might be relatively easy to get if we're taking good records, but are all those costs making this project worthwhile? And I think it's also critical for someone in this or considering taking up this venture is to consider those costs that are non-financial, if I could say that. A lot of times ag producers are passionate about what they're growing or what they're producing. And getting into something that's much more of a people business is just something that's different. And there's people that are going to be good at it and people that are not going to be good at it and not enjoy it. So we might need to be looking at, is there someone on our management team, or could we hire somebody else that is going to thrive working directly with people in this business? So this is a business venture where, yes, the economic tools are going to be important, but also using some measures of, is it worth it to me? Is it, does it mesh with my operations goals and objectives to have people on the outside people, tourists on our ag production property?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think there's opportunities for big payoffs with, agritourism. Obviously, though, it might not be something that fits your personality or style, so maybe you need to bring in someone else and think about that. There's a lot of decisions to be made, but Brian, where do you think a good place to get started is?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all kind of talking about it. You're getting started with this, and so I think we've kind of hinted at, but thinking about, we talked about your passion, right? So this might be your passion, but then really taking that next step to really look at the market, right? One of how are you going to market this, but then, two, making sure that there is a market where people are going to want to, come to your land or wherever you might be doing this to actually physically be there. So, again, as Barton kind of mentioned, finding somebody, the right people to help you out is really important with that, but really taking the time to make sure that, you'll have people that want to actually come where you're at. The tourism that you're offering is right up the alley of what people want to see and do. And then also making sure, you have different outlets for how you get that information out there. There's different online platforms and different things for catching people's eye to let them know that you're there. But just really working through that is important before you just say, I'm going to put all this money and capital into this and make it happen. But really doing that market analysis is really important.
Yeah, I like that. And, maybe you're at the point where you've decided, yeah, I do want to do this. It fits my personality. And you've identified your market, the people that you think you can get there and who you're going to target. Once you kind of have that in place, Bridger, maybe what are some economic tools that you can use to then further evaluate, am I actually going to make money at this?
Yeah, I think this is another actually great example of a use for the partial budget tool. Partial budget can be really handy in making this decision, especially if you're just adding this ag tourism business to an existing agriculture business. So if you're just adding this part in, the partial budget could be pretty straightforward in terms of just thinking through some of those additional costs that you would incur by adding this business in. The real challenge on this analysis, and as I've worked with other farmers and ranchers as they've added ag tourism business in, is getting the revenue side right in terms of that estimate when they're doing the partial budget. So, Brian mentioned it in terms of that understanding your market, but really understanding what the market is available out there and what your market share could be, how much market penetration you can get. Those are all questions that are challenging to get at and really would make or break you in your partial budget. So really spending some time to really understand, and get a realistic number in terms of how many people you can bring into this business is key in this analysis to make sure that it'll make a profit for you in the end.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Again, obviously there's a lot to think about here, but there are tools and resources that can be used to decide whether or not this is going to be a profitable venture for you. And I think they did, a good job in this project of kind of going over those things too.
Hopefully you found this discussion helpful as we tied the project to the other tools and concepts that we've already talked about. And hopefully you'll watch the rest of the videos in this series.